Hey folks, Steve here with another Axis Empires Ultimate Edition 1944 Daisenso Divine Wind Campaign video. That's a bit of a mouthful. Um, we're going to be entering into the winter turns of 44 to 45, and then probably we'll get through spring in this video, I would suspect, and then the next video, the next couple of videos after that, finishing us out with VJ Day marker on the November-December turn of next year. We have kind of a year left to go. Um, and if I just take a moment to look over the map, right, we started in May, June. We've managed to smash our face into uh, into Rabal, and that's been all fine and dandy. But we haven't actually taken it, so that's a bit of an annoyance. We did take Saipan. We ignored Guam because at this point it doesn't really matter as long as we keep a unit there. I don't have much to fear. Um, we did take Truck, which is kind of a big deal because that allows us to have a lot more naval basing capability smack dab in the middle of everything, and we do have the ability to set a new service squadron somewhere, um, and that will likely either be Saipan itself, or maybe we'll pick some other place. But we're starting to break into the Japanese perimeter as the Americans, and we've got a lot more flexibility. The Japanese Navy is down to its kind of last couple of legs for operating, and the Japanese might have to look at rearranging a few ships just to stay um, alive. But they're kind of in trouble. In Burma, we have well, before I jump to Burma, getting ahead of myself. We have also taken uh, Palau, and we have now landed in the northern Philippines. And I will say that I kind of got tunnel vision, and I kind of ignored the historical way that the Americans got into the Philippines. So um, historically, we would have, I guess, and there was a unit here to do it in Hollandia, but I moved it around. Would have been to like progress this guy uh, to Monado, and then use that as the 1, 2, 3 within 3 hexes to get around the Allied danger zone restriction and get into Davao. Um, because I didn't come over here and get this, uh, I just have I had to go a different route, and um, there were there, I guess, I don't know how to describe it. It went fine. It just, I had to pick a different option. And it took a little bit more logistical craziness to make it work. Where, yeah, had I just used this way, it might have been cheaper, more efficient on markers to get to where I got to. But that's okay. And as it stands now, we do have our POA logistics marker. We're going to have our POA logistics marker there for future activities. It's there set up. That will be we'll be able to do some replacements in that location. And so basically, the Americans have kind of pushed their logistics maybe dangerously forward, but in a way that allows us to leverage the Philippines as a good base of operations. My plan for the Philippines is to have two multi-step American units just march down the island chain, breaking out the Japanese hold on these strategic hexes, and will be in good working order there to continue on uh, doing more effectively. And we can, there's a lot of things we can do from there. The other nice thing is it gives us, now we already do have now ports that allow us to project into the South China Sea, into um, we've got a couple ways to get around here, which is something I do want to get, because as soon as we can get into Batavia, that's going to deprive control of Balikpanan, and that's basically two strategic hexes flip to the Japanese. The reason why the Japanese still control this is because the NEI is conquered, and so they're dependent. Borneo is still technically controlled. I had to kind of double check that. I believe that to be the case. So the Allies do need to get into Batavia, but there's really only one unit left. If the Japanese try to shift some units around, they could maybe get more down there, but they really don't have terribly many options at this point. So um, it just depends on strength. China has been a real, quiet affair. There's just been a lot of movement. I'm going to need to double check my aid to China because I think I've been forgetting to do some of that. It could be a problem. Um, but still, we are seeing not a lot of action there. And maybe that's to be expected. Once the Russians kind of come in, that's where things are going to get get greater intensity. But there's only going to be like a turn or two of Russian actions. So however you want to figure that out. The British finally are making some progress of their own. At this point, they have kind of a spread out uh, situation with like one air unit over here. That was just to make sure that if need be, we could do something with it. But I think they originally had two. I think one of them got shot down, and so now we're kind of in a different state. Um, our fleet here is really to provide support and possibly CV strike capability along the coast of Burma, which we have done, and that was a big help for us previously. The next things we need to be concerned with, or what we want to be trying to work, is as we get our markers back, what else are we going to do? We're going to continue to use these resources to push on the Japanese units near Rangoon. That's a strategic hex. We want to get that. So I gotta clean up this guy so these guys can continue to move, swinging down this way. We've still got a couple of multi-step units hanging out here, but under concentrated effort um, by the British. The Burma front's gonna collapse at this point. We managed to get a just beautiful die roll of a 1, which took out 2 steps, eliminated an entire unit. So the Burma front's in trouble. At the same time, though, it's going to be the British that get into Batavia. So I'm going to have to decide, do I want a lot of progress in Burma, or do I need to kind of find the time and opportunity to get a beachhead marker down here? And if I'm doing a beachhead marker down here at Batavia, that means I'm not putting a beachhead marker somewhere else, which that might be okay because we're going to be busy marching through the Philippines and maybe reorganizing, moving other stuff around. It might not be a big deal that we're not opening up a new beachhead for the moment. But by spring, we need to be hitting Okinawa. So we're on a timer here. We got to figure out what we can do, how fast we can do it. But I'd like to put a beachhead marker, get this port, be next to Batavia, build up some additional strength, maybe even ship in some Americans. If we take care of Rabaul, that would be a nice thing to do. Take Rabaul, ship some units around into this port, and then punch our way into Batavia. All that sounds complex, and I will say that the complexity of the situation um, is a tax on our action economy. And in Axis Empires, I will say, and I think this is a good thing for the game, like even if you are wielding overwhelming force, like the Allies seem to be wielding a lot of the time, especially in the late war. Well, I guess only in the late war, but when they do, I guess for either side when they have the momentum, there is a timer aspect to everything. How long do you get the cards for? What do the cards give you? They give you that capability for the season. And if that season, I mean, in a longer season with 3 turns like summer, that might feel like a lot, but it's really not. It's 3 turns, it's 3 goes to make progress. So you need to make what you need to make happen. So by the time we get to VJ Day, I really need, and if I set my objectives right, I need the British half of the Western Allies to get into Rangoon, I think that's achievable. We need to get into Batavia to relieve both these strategic hexes. That's potentially feasible. At the same time, we need to continue to move these guys through Burma. We probably need to knock over Siam to get into Saigon, because technically the Japanese still control Saigon. That's another strategic hex we need to pick up. Um, and there's a lot of other things I need to start preparing to do, like bombing the Japanese home islands with our bombers so we get some devastation markers in the home islands, and then make sure I leave a couple of those strategic hexes uh, open to be hit with an A bomb, assuming we get the A bombs after we take Okinawa, and that, we have to trace our hexes. Right now, the bombing range from Saipan is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to Osaka. That's the only one that we can hit from Saipan. So we need to take Iwo Jima or Okinawa to reach any other hexes. We've got 2 bombers, so we can, in effect, get 2 strategic hexes with devastation markers for the end game. And then the A bomb, which I believe if we get the right success on the card, we'll get 2 A bomb markers. That should get us 2 more strategic hexes. So we can get about 4 of what's in the home islands with devastation markers, but I do need the islands to support the action to actually go do that. So, and I've got a couple of ideas of how and what I'm actually going to do with that. But well, we'll see. Right now, coming into this next winter term, the Japanese have only 2 support markers for. Well, they have some torpedo boats, but they have 2 air units. So that's kind of all they have to really stop the Allied forces. And due to the kamikaze marker, they can only use them to stop or to contest placement. So we're gonna have to just look to see, like, where can we make that work. Like here, it could be used to stop an invasion, which would kind of use up the British capability for a hot moment. Alternatively, it could stop us from making a big play on Rabaul, and could be used to block some of the air placement that we really need to crack Rabaul at this point. I figured out I'm going to need to do multiple air unit placements to crack Rabaul. That's just where we're at now. That's the reality. Um, so there's a lot of things to puzzle out. I mean, you as the Western Allied player are not just playing against the Japanese. You're playing against the time and geography and how much bandwidth you have in a given turn to make progress somewhere. So, like, in my mind, it seems like every turn you need to be placing a beachhead successfully. That will get you a strategic hex, at least 1, if not 2, or have the capability to turn into 2. Um, and if you miss that marker, you're going to lose out on something. And I definitely would like to go for a win as the Americans. I want to get to 3 victory points, which means -9 Allied Crusade. And the math against that's going to be tough. It gets hard to get all the way up to 3, but to win, that's what we got to do. One last comment for intro before I break into the winter stuff. I should have done this first because I think this is more generally applicable. That's my bad video, Steve. Bad. In terms of Schiffskrieg right now, I'll say this. I think this is actually a bad scenario to start Schiffskrieg with, or maybe it's good. So here's the perspective. Schiffskrieg, the actual combat systems can be attritional. That you can't, like, it's hard to find a naval battle where you don't lose a little bit of something. Even if it's paltry, you're going to lose a ship sometimes. Like, it's just going to happen unless the enemy misses entirely, which, just based on average die numbers, like, you figure, for every so many die rolls, you're going to get at least 1, 5, or 6, right? So, and that's really what affects all these things, and taking damage and losing ships. So based on the firepower that's involved in combat, like, there's going to be some damage done, right? That always happens, and that happens in World in Flames. That happens in other games too. But obviously, 1944, the Japanese Navy is, we kind of see its death throes, right, historically there. in terms of their capability, their carrier capability. And we saw that happen here, right? Like we have seen very similar combats, except when in one case where the Japanese maybe overperformed from history and took out a couple of American carriers. But that hasn't really strategically changed anything, which I think is accurate in many ways, but accurate to what it would be in history. But um, even now, as I look at it, I go, well, what's really metering the Japanese capability to respond is not the number of ships they have left, but their support markers, which would be kind of just the same as if we were playing without Schiff's Krieg. And that there is a design intent that the part designer of Schiff's Krieg, didn't want the game to be so changed by Schiff's Krieg that you could end up with like too far different results. So knowing the like, okay, well, we're not maybe too far different from where we would be if we were uh, playing without Schiff's Krieg, due to the support markers being the only units or the only markers used to adjudicate these things. So kind of a mixed bag there. But the it being 1944, like it's just going to go the way that it's going to go, right? So it's not exciting as much because I know the way that this is going to go, right? Like this is there's not, and this is historically accurate, right? This is I'm listening to a podcast about Lady Gulf, and it's like, yeah, the Americans could not have like been dealt a serious blow by the Japanese. Like they could lose a bunch of stuff, but they just had more stuff. So it's like you, at best, the Japanese would have to get extraordinarily, extraordinarily, extraordinarily lucky to stop the Americans, in a naval air series of combats, and it's just not mathematically. It's just going to be near impossible, and we're seeing what we should expect to see. So these combats where I'm taking time doing the battle board, I mean, the conclusions are kind of not that unknown. The ability to do a base attack and kind of these alternate different activities is fun. Like it's like, all right, I'm going to try to, let me try to do a base attack. Let's see what we can make happen here. Maybe that'll help. That we can do different things. It's cool to be able to do that. It's fun to try. There's fun in doing the battles. In terms of the impact, though, it feels a bit subdued. Now, but I do want to put a disclaimer on that that's because this is the 1944 campaign. So, like, if you just want to learn how Schiff's Krieg works and you don't care how impactful it is, this scenario might be fine. You got plenty of ships, so chuck them and see what happens, right? You can kind of safely, quote unquote, learn the mechanics, because if the outcomes are pretty well understood what they're probably going to be, you can just focus on how does the system work, what steps do I need to be following, and that's fine. Um, but the better scenarios, I think, for Schiff's Krieg are going to be your 37, starting from the beginning scenarios, or even 39, 40, 41, 42, because at least for Daisenso, because there the Japanese have the opportunity to possibly achieve the thing that they wanted to achieve, which they didn't get, which was to win an extraordinary victory early and then try to repeat that as much as they can as the new American aircraft carriers are coming off the line, right? So like you need to start early. You have to hope for good luck and carry that good luck momentum as long as possible as the Japanese, right? That's what you're hoping to get. By 1944, that's just not achievable. But if you're playing Schiff's Krieg then, and you get into maybe those situations where you've destroyed American aircraft carriers, they have a CB strike marker and they just can't use it, that could save the Japanese turns of effort, or deprive the Americans of turns of effort that by the end game could lead to a more ensured Axis victory, because you've slowed down the American advance in the Pacific by that much. So I think Schiff's Krieg has an important role in that, more exciting, like, yeah, let's see if we can sink those American aircraft carriers in this fight. If they manage to miss ours and we can get just a little bit of an advantage there, and we can hold it for a couple of fleet battles, we're buying ourselves time, and I think that's maybe the significant thing. And so those earlier scenarios are probably going to make Schiff's Creek more meaningful than the one I'm playing. The one exception to that, and I wonder, is it appropriate to come up with some kind of house rule for this? I still feel that limiting capability based on the support markers really hinders the system. So even if we did do well, right, um, and we end up with, I mean, it's still a stalemate fight as of the end result, which means the support markers go to the delay box. Well, we could still end up with a really crappy delay box roll that kind of makes it superfluous that we beat the Americans to a decent degree. Like, it might not even matter. If the Japanese can't get their CB strike or CB fleet support marker back, even if they have the fleet, they might not get that marker back. Um, and I maybe I missed this in the rules, but if you rolled that 6 in the naval warfare delay box, even though you might not have lost too many ships, you could still end up with that support marker being kicked out a huge number of turns if you roll a 6. And you have to roll again and add them together. And so, like, my house rule or something might be like, if you're going to play with Schiff's Krieg, maybe you don't maybe you just roll the naval warfare delay box for support markers straight and let a 6 be a 6 with modifiers and not do the extra roll. Maybe I need to read the book and make sure it's not actually that way, but it certainly feels like that makes a lot more sense, because once the support marker is just that political will to do a fleet action and you have a good fleet, like, it boggles my mind that you could have the deep 6 die roll on political will, because it no longer represents material. So I don't know. There's things with this Schiffskrieg where I'm looking at it and I'm just going. I think it's fun to have it, but I do wonder if there are some things that are just part of this design that don't quite hit how I think it ought to be. And that's just me. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that there's certain hooks into this that I feel could be different. So that's a 22-minute check-in introduction, guys. Oh my gosh, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry, but I felt like this was a good time after a couple of seasons, after we've made some big advances, to kind of talk about how this is going. It is fun. I'm having a good time. The purpose of playing the 1944 campaign was not to try out Schiff's Creek explicitly. I just wanted to do a late war scenario, just like I did an early war scenario, so I could see both sides on the offensive and experience the game, which I think the 1944 Divine Wind campaign is a great one for that, because I am getting to do all these, the island hopping campaign as the Americans. That's all very fun. Schiff's Creek being included was just more the consequence of me feeling like I was ready to give it a shot, not because I thought this scenario was going to be a good Schiff's Creek scenario or not. So anyway, I'm going to take a cut here, and then we'll start digging into the Axis turn for winter. The weather will be mud in the south monsoon, which um, might mean we don't do a whole lot in the um, the south region. Though what we may end up doing is, if we do get a beachhead marker, we can do a beachhead marker here, I believe, and we can uh, advance after combat and not be hung up by the mud too much. Like, we can get into the NEI if we try to do that in mud for the South Monsoon, but it will make attacking, not great, and we'll have to wait before we actually launch any offensives. So lots to think about, guys. So let me go get rolling with that. Okay, I just played through the Japanese turn. Not a whole lot there. So we still don't have a lot of options. What I did end up doing is, we had a conditional event that allowed us to place one of these home defense units. We had one step in Japan. I actually used troop convoys, and these are the delay marker ones, so this is kind of a big commitment. I put another step in Rabaul. I hadn't put any of the American fleets out on station to block the ports, which was kind of silly on my part, maybe, but I didn't have, I guess, the markers to do it. Maybe I could have used my subs for this, and I I kind of screwed this up as the Americans. Well, now I put another step in here. So after the reorg segment, the stack was like this, and now we've got another unit. So it's max stacking, and it's got some air cover. And Rabal is just the fortress that could. So it's kind of its own tough thing to crack. And right now, I'm like, I don't know how I get in there now. I really don't. We've got to figure out some way to get into Rabal, and I just don't see how I can do it. Now, the one other thing that occurred is that we had a die roll on the Bushido table, and it actually ended up being a axis failure of command. So the Allies stuck it there, and the Japanese lost one of their two air support markers, support units. So now the Japanese are down to one, which means the Japanese can really only contest one thing this coming turn. Problem is, they can it. I almost need to roll a die here because where are they going to do this? What can they defend? Well, they could contest placement on Okinawa. They could contest placement near Rabaul. They could contest placement near Batavia. And so as we get to the Allied turn, it's like, okay, this is another one of those playing solo sucks to some degree because you kind of have to look at it and go, well, the Allies could make a run at anything, and the Japanese really only have one chance to stop it. They have air cover in enough places that they can say, I'm going to stop that. But as soon as they do, they're sacrificing something. So it's like, okay, well, if we try to get into Okinawa, and you're trying to measure like what's the biggest impact. Well, if we lose Okinawa, that's going to have the potential to give up several strategic hexes due to the bombing. So you probably want to put greater emphasis on defending Okinawa, and if you do that, then that leaves Batavia at risk. But you're having to make that calculation. If I defend Batavia, for instance, then it's going to make it that much easier for um, Okinawa to be attacked. And to be honest, there's not much in Okinawa right now. Um, so maybe I should have transported that unit to Okinawa. Um, yeah, maybe I should have done that. Maybe I still can. Um, I need to think through. Do I have the sea lift? I certainly would have had the sea lift capability to move another unit. But by doing so, I'm kind of giving up something else, right? Um, I could have maybe moved. I could have maybe used something, but anyway, I think I'm making some. Both sides are making some mistakes. I'm just going to have to live with them. So that's kind of the rub. Now the Japanese really don't have much choice in what they can defend. So you have to defend the most important spot, which right now would probably be Okinawa. I could even bypass Iwo Jima potentially. Like, why even take Iwo Jima, other than it's a strategic hex? But focus would be on Okinawa, which is what our spring card is for, as the Americans. So I could get a head start there, and then who knows. Or I could even try a bombing attempt to devastate a strategic marker even right now and force the Japanese to try to defend it. So it's all these, like, I've got four different places I could go as the Americans. The Japanese can only defend one of them, and they can pass on defending, as the Americans go, and then pick one somewhere in the order to stop it. But again, when you're playing against just yourself, it's harder to do this. In an opposed game, you're kind of pressuring your opponent. Yeah, you gonna stop me? You gonna stop me now? Look at this thing I'm doing over here. Are you gonna stop me now? Um, but this is harder solitaire. So anyway, that was the Japanese turn. Not much to cover here, guys. Just trying to move units around to better defend. We're watching the egg crack. The Americans have a lot more in terms of decision making to do. Important thing is we kept the Japanese via the failure of command. These guys couldn't pull back and couldn't go anywhere. So we're kind of holding them in place. They probably wouldn't have moved much anyway, but just that, like, hey, you're stuck right now, and we're going to pummel you, which is what we can expect to have happen here over time. So Anyway, yeah, let me go play through some of the American turn, folks, and we'll see the results. Okay, I'm going with no stand, just holding the camera, so it'll be a little shaky. First turn of winter is over. November, December is over. We're heading into 45. At the moment, the northern parts of the Philippines, from Manila on, are liberated, and now we just continue the march down south to get to Val. I'm kind of taking the slow route. That could be a problem. I'd really like to get another strategic hex this next turn, um, so that I can knock the Japanese political DRMs off entirely. But we're not quite there yet. So these guys are going to continue to march down, work it. I decided we kind of did a fake out. We got a CV strike marker on Okinawa, but kind of to no major change yet. We need to follow that up with another CV strike on the next turn to keep it there. But it will keep the Japanese from reinforcing Okinawa, and it is weakened at the moment. Here, we did get an invasion, a freebie invasion, marching into this port, which enables us to reposition stuff in here. We got a few units. And probably what we'll end up working on doing here is getting more units shipped in as we can. There's kind of I'm making a decision. We're making progress here. I think I can force something to happen here in Batavia eventually, but so long as we're in here and the weather clears, then we can focus on Batavia. We're going to continue to pressure this line, so we put another replacement step in Burma. We didn't really get much more progress, but I think next Allied turn, that's when it's going to get more hectic, and we'll probably see the Japanese try to swap some units around because this is looking generally bad for them. They want to save the HQ if they can. And then just elsewhere, we did, because the Japanese were out of defenders, we did drop one of our bombers on that for a devastation marker, so starting to bang up the home islands. Still not able to make much more ground here yet. We've got an HQ powered up. We've got a lot, in place to try to force this, but it's going to take more effort. We dropped the subfleet to stop reinforcements further, but this is going to be a grind, and I'm not sure how far we'll really get with this for a while. So this ball might fall really late in the scenario. Everywhere else, we're kind of keeping a decent pace and getting in a position, and we'll just work to continue doing that here into the next turn. So yeah, I'm going to do the second turn of winter, and we'll see what else can occur. I think the Americans are doing what they can, but there's a logistical bottleneck that's a challenge. I did realize I had some units around over here that didn't need to be there, and so they have detachment markers, and now I'm trying to ship some additional American corps because the Allies really don't have that many units, and even our additional replacements, we're not getting that many. And a lot of them, again, a lot of American steps are in the Philippines right now trying to clear that out. So we've just got a lot more work to do here, and a lot more stuff to get set up, and it's going to be slow going. I probably should have been moving those corps much earlier in the scenario. I could have probably done that once the kamikaze marker got placed, but well, we'll see. So yeah, going into the next turn, the Japanese probably very limited options in terms of what they can do this next turn, and then the Americans will continue their offensives. The British will continue what offensives they can muster. Now that they have a port here, it's going to be easier to continue to push in the Dutch East Indies with what forces they can send from Burma once they've kind of cleaned up Burma. So that should eventually fall without too much more effort or pain, and we'll go from there. So, yep, let me get through it. Okay, here we are at the start of spring. The timers really are ticking here, folks. There's not much left on the board in terms of a Japanese navy. We have a beachhead against Okinawa, but just due to the limited number of supply convoys that I have situated right now, basically still we're still constrained. So at best I opened up the beachhead. I did transport troops into that beachhead to attack Okinawa, but I I couldn't get a real attack off there. So that's kind of I'd say we've got major offensives happening in many places across the map. Okinawa is the start of one, and we'll use the spring to ideally finish the job and then look at Iwo Jima as well as, well, anywhere else that we think we need to hit. Um, Philippines, we still got some marching to do to finish this off. We've still got oh, whoops, I've got goofiness going on here with some of my markers, guys. I'm sorry. We did get an attack at Rabaul, so we did reduce that stack a little bit, just with concentrated air strength, but we're going to have to keep hitting it. So that's going to be a tough nut to crack. We did get some units shipped into this hex next to Batavia. So once the weather clears in the South Monsoon region, which will be this March, April spring turn, we do expect some offensive actions here. And if we can use our pending Western Allied blitz markers to try to get through the city, that's going to be one of the things we're going to try to do. And that should get us in. We're going to continue to push through here now. Like, we're at the point where the Burma theater should be a clean, guaranteed we're going to work our way through there, and probably get to Saigon before the end of the campaign. So yeah, I mean, everything's still kind of churning, burning on at this point, and continue to make what progress I can. The Japanese are kind of bottoming out right now on support markers. They're really not going to have any valuable support markers going into this first spring turn. They've got some troop convoys, scratch convoys, that they can be trying to move around a little bit and maybe shift some steps, maybe, give up defense in Davao, because I think this is going to be I think all things considered, it's going to be an open shut case in Davao. So maybe the Japanese are better off giving up Davao to transport something into Rabaul and guarantee that we continue to churn our way through the Rabaul stuff, which is terribly annoying for the Americans. So we might see that happen. In terms of the new cards for the spring season, the Americans, I keep saying Americans, it's really Western Allies, just the Americans are currently the most potent force. Operation Iceberg, so that's 2 blitz markers, which could be very valuable, and we finally get some additional steps that we've been waiting to show up for a while now. That's really going to be a value to us, so that's really good. Finally get some more, and then the pending card after that is going to be Operation Oboe. That's 2 blitz markers, which is going to be good. More steps. We really need those steps at this point. I mean, that's absolutely the case. Absolutely going to need that. Make that work. And then for the Japanese, they are going to have the Ketsugo defense plan, which is going to put some stuff out. We'll have to see how much of this is valuable at this point. The steps are probably the most important piece of the puzzle. And then the pending card will be Asia for the Asians, which provides some additional colonial steps. So that's going to continue to be a thorn in the Allied side if the Japanese can continue to put some steps on the board. The Russians are going to have limited war production, which just get some more stuff. We'll see where we get with that, and their pending card will be War Progress 5. So a nice buildup of forces. It's just that, the Russians aren't going to be in the war very long. So everything they do is going to have to count pretty heavily. And there are some strategic hexes up here that could be in mind for the Russians to grab to help push the VP track. So that's all reasonable. So we've been grinding to get to this point where we're gonna flip multiple strategic hexes, but the net effect will be that Japan still has Axis tied as of March, April 1945, which means like we are going to have to just make some big hay here as we flip, 1, 2, 3, 4, possibly 5, victory hexes, and then we're going to need to push and get even more. And so it could still be an Axis victory. While we might be thinking, hey, we're running roughshod over stuff. We've still got a lot to go. We've still got a lot of stuff that we need to get resolved. I've got some pretty good plan ideas on how we're going to make more progress, but still a lot of pain to deal with here. So more to come. Okay, I have a few administrative things to finish up on this first spring turn, but um, just to talk about progress. So allies continue to smash into Rabal, and we're getting close to the breaking point, but we're just not quite there yet. But I am sealing off the possibility of reinforcements, so I think we'll eventually break through here. I'll probably end up using a blitz marker on the second spring turn to try to finish things off. We are back into the Dutch East Indies, which means Borneo is clear, Batavia is clear, so we pick that up and can kind of hold a stalemate here. That's fine. Which does open up, a door a bit more into the Java Sea, being able to project some force out there. We are right next to Rangoon. We'll probably crush our way through there um, here shortly, and then be on a warpath through Siam to Saigon. So I think we're going to be on schedule for that. We did take Okinawa, so now we are kind of in a good prime position of holding a center place right across all the remaining Japanese strongholds. We need to decide, do we go for easier conquests at this point? Do we jump into Iwo Jima and try to take that next? Do we try to take um, Taihoku? Do we try to get into Shanghai? I mean, all of these are options at this point. Um, Going to Iwo Jima would allow us to have some additional uh, basing near Japan to launch some more strikes. That might be valuable, but Okinawa kind of gets us that. It is a good question, like why go for Iwo Jima? Because we could grab Taihoku, we could grab Shanghai, and we could then move to take Hong Kong back using our range from Taihoku. So if I'm just going purely for strategic hexes, I don't think Iwo Jima is terribly important right now to the overall picture. I mean, it's another strategic hex to pick up, but um, we're on the verge of grabbing many strategic hexes here in the short term. As long as we can keep taking a strategic hex by beachhead landing per turn, and we keep moving, we keep operating. What may get us are delay segment things where we're not quite getting what we need. We still have our -3 Western delay die roll modifier. The Japanese are getting worse all the time. So really from here, we're at max U.S. commitment level. The Philippines are clear. You can see we're going to end up using our big service fleet transport to move these three-step units to wherever we need to go. We will succeed. We're going to bring enough firepower. We're going to crush our way through. We've got Marines on the board as the Americans. Like we are now able to execute our strength very well across the board. The Japanese Navy is down to a few battleships and cruisers. Now the tricky thing is we've got this Tengo plan marker, which didn't really matter for this turn because the Japanese ran out of support markers to use, and we aren't activating the need for a scratch fleet yet for the Japan scratch defense fleet. But basically what that Tengo plan does, and I got to keep my eye on the marker because it's tricky. Basically, the Japanese can always send one ship or one plane as a task force, and there is no way, or it's very hard for the Americans to achieve a success. So it kind of obfuscates Schiffskrieg entirely by basically just putting you in the mode of support marker versus support marker. Almost is kind of the way the Tengo plan marker seems to go. So we're kind of giving up on the Schiffskrieg mechanics almost at that point, and just relying on support markers, which really for the Americans isn't really a problem, because we're kind of at will being able to execute what we need to execute. So as the Japanese right now, I mean, I'm having trouble figuring out what else to do. I can start to pull some units back in China, but the Americans are going to show up in our backfield any second and start supporting the Chinese from the Chinese coast. If we land in Shanghai or even Taihoku and then get into Hong Kong, I mean, there's just going to be too much pressure to handle. And you have the British, now making a beeline to Saigon. Things are just going to start to collapse pretty heavily here. The only hope the Japanese are going to get any protection at this point is they are going to get an Air Force marker back in this next spring turn, which they could use to maybe fend off a bombing run that they could use. Well, for any number of things, that the Japanese will still have Air Force markers through to the end here, and that may be all that they can hope to rely on to keep bombings from occurring. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the tough thing. So let me play through this last turn for the video, the second spring turn of 45, and we should have a pretty good idea just how far along we need to be for the rest of the game. Okay, here we are at the end of spring 1945, and a lot of activities. I mean, with the kind of absence of the Japanese fleet, and there's really not much. I mean, a lot of this, honestly, is coming down to the Japanese really not having support markers. So this gets to that problem. They have ships, but apparently no political will to use them. And in the process of that, we've consolidated our control of Okinawa. We have taken Taihoku here. So Taiwan's under control. And, we're not far away from looking at Hong Kong, though the Japanese are probably going to retract units from China into Hong Kong proper, and probably pull back in a number of places to consolidate the defense of other areas. We could look at Shanghai similarly. And we're at the point where we can start thinking about trying to get into the home islands of Japan, though I don't know that that's going to be the most advantageous way to go about this. To be honest, at this point in the game, I'm reasonably confident that this is going to be a tremendous Allied victory, and I'll explain why. As of right now, the victory check is 1 victory point in favor of Allied Crusade. We are at -4 for the strategic hex count, or the strategic value. We need to get one more to get to 2 victory points, which would bring us to a tie with the Japanese. We'd still lose as the Allies for that reason. We need to pick up 5 more hexes, basically. That would get us to -9, and that would be enough for victory. However, well, and I'll tell you, I'm going to keep pushing as hard as I can through the rest of the game just to ensure that we reach an appropriate level of victory here. We're going to do what we can. We're still fighting at Rangoon. We haven't taken it yet, but the British are probably going to succeed this next turn in summer, and that will be 1 more. So then we need 4 more. Well, as it happens, I've already bombed, Osaka and Tokyo, though it's hidden by some markers there. Both the American bombers have now successfully bombed Japan. So there are 2 devastation markers. Those will count as controlling those hexes for Allied purposes at the end of the game. Not right now, but at the end of the game they will. So we can, while for the purposes of die roll modifiers and a great number of things, we have 1 VP and we have -4 strategic value. We know at the end, if nothing changed right now, it would be -6 because of those 2 other hexes. So if we can pick up Rangoon, and we have those 2 other hexes, that will put us at -7, and then we just need 2 more. Well, I'll tell you that those are almost guaranteed at this point, or are guaranteed, because our fall card will be the Manhattan Project. Not this coming summer one, but our fall card. And if you look at this, so what does this do? ESV, that doesn't matter anymore. Apply European commitment, okay. Blah, blah, blah. Conditional events. If U.S. posture is war, apply project success A-bomb. And so if I get that for 2 turns, that will give us 2 additional devastation markers in Japan. We will certainly have the basing for it, the air basing for it. So we'll get 2 more. That would be enough. What can disrupt that right now? Well, I'm going to have to look to see what the peace offer card results will truly lead to. If somehow Japan gets lucky, or maybe the die rolls are going to matter here, that peace comes sooner than we expect, um, then maybe the Americans won't have a posture of war, and then that will mean that they don't drop the A bombs, in which case we wouldn't get those last 2 that we want to get. So just keeping that in mind, right? We know that we're 2 up higher than we think. So really, we need 3 more strategic hexes. So over the course of these next, 3 turns, give or take, I'm gonna want to. I guess I'm gonna want to have. Um, uh, I'm sorry, guys. I need a few more. Right, we're gonna get Rangoon, so that will get us to -5. We've got the devastation markers. That'll get us to -7. So we just need 2 more. So somewhere on the map over here in summer, we should try to get at least 2 more strategic hexes. There's not much stopping us from getting into Saigon. The Japanese really don't have a good way to get somebody into Saigon at this point. So long as the Commonwealth can bust through Rangoon, push through Siam, get to Saigon, they should be in good shape. That'd be one. And then you figure we're probably going to grab either Hong Kong um, or possibly uh, Shanghai or Hong Kong. I mean, either one of those would be enough then to get us just a little bit further, and that's all we'd really need to do. And what we could look at doing is if we took Shanghai, we might turn that into a whole route and get into Wuhan. I'm not sure if that's reasonable, but we could certainly look at doing something like that. Both of those are options at this point. We have enough air cover that we can target those locations. We can try to get in there, depending on what the Japanese can defend with. That may kind of determine, what the deal ends up being. Um, Now, all of that is ignoring the Russians for a second, because the Russians will come in the fall. So if for some reason we didn't get quite what we needed by the end, the Russians will enter. And just looking at the map, the Russians have a very reasonable chance of picking up at least 2 strategic hexes. There would be one here that I'm preparing for, and I think I've followed the rules that I can have units set up there. That Kamchatka is part of Russia, so I've been slowly adding steps there when the Russians have gotten steps, who would attack to try to get a hold of this hex. We can also pressure here a little bit somehow, but then we have Harbin up here that we have a very reasonable chance of getting units into at that point. And so um, there are certain things that the Japanese will try to do to defend against the Russian actions here, but there's not a lot of great options for them. So as things get closer to Russian entry, the Japanese may try to pull some units around up there to get the garrison needed, but the Russians should expect to be able to get into Harbin if they try hard enough, and that's really where we're at. So is there a possibility that the Axis can still win? I mean, it's there. It depends on the die rolls, but I think the paths to victory for the Allies is very high. They have multiple paths they can try to take to get to victory. I'm not ending the campaign early or anything, but as we close up this video, I'm betting it's going to be an Allied victory. I don't see, how else we're going to run into a huge number of problems. Um, for the Allies, it's just going to depend on how fast they can move through some of these other areas that they're going to need to operate, basically. So that's really it. That's the concern at this point. We've got plenty of ability to project force. We can put supply convoys of the British into the Java Sea. We can push through to Saigon. We can try to snipe a couple more strategic hexes around. We can try to get into Iwo Jima. I mean, that's a whole option I haven't even really thought too hard about because I haven't needed to get in there. The Japanese have very limited capability to try to take Saipan back. I mean, they could try to ship somebody into Guam, but at this point, I have enough uh, support markers where, I mean, if they try to make something happen, we could very easily take it back. Very very easily take it back. So there's just the Japanese don't have many options at all is what it feels like at this point. I mean, they just, and I think some of this maybe was me not doing enough in China to like pull units away from the front in China and ship them somewhere else. We're really constrained by these troop convoys, the scratch convoys, because I can only use them in so many places. They go to the delay box when you're done with them on the next turn. And there's just not enough shipping to move a lot of stuff around very, very quickly. So um, it is a fun ride. I will say this. This has been entertaining to kind of play through, figure out how exactly I'm going to work the puzzle to get the units where they need to be. And now we've got the opportunity to really push into the Japanese backfield and take stuff from them. I mean, what we could even do, we could go for Hong Kong via a land route, march into Foochow, and then walk our way over and start attacking, um, this way, one way or another, to try to disrupt. The terrain's kind of bad, and supply would be, I guess, a problem. So maybe we can't do that. But there are options, I guess. I'll put it that way. We have options. So anyway, guys, we'll go to the next video here. So in the next video, we'll cover summer and fall, and that'll very likely be the end of the game. So one more video of the campaign. We'll see what happens. The naval fighting is largely over. There's going to be probably a few skirmishes. The Japanese making use of that 10-go plan counter to try to stave off the support markers, but there's really not that much that they can do. There's not they got to keep a fleet near home so they can defend. Sort of last ditch effort to try to defend against invasions of the home islands, which, to be honest, would be the fastest way to get the strategic hexes needed. We just need to plop into the home islands and we could grab multiple hexes very very quickly, probably, or pretty consistently we could, because there's not that many units in the Japanese home islands right now. Very little to defend it. So if we actually plopped our way into there, we could probably grab a lot of hexes. Maybe I should be thinking about doing that too. All right, I'm rambling. Lots of things. But we're going to be closing up soon. So thanks for watching. If you've stuck with, we will see you in the summer fall turn in the next video when I can get to that, which should be very soon. In the meantime, take care. Keep on gaming.